All right, everyone, thanks for joining this morning. I'd like to call to order the Malibu Environmental Review Board meeting of September 25th. It is now 9:04 a.m. This meeting is held teleconferencely. Boards and city staff are participating from remote locations. Members of the public can participate in the meeting via Zoom. And the public who wish to speak during the meeting must click the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen to indicate their desire to speak after the item has been announced by the chair and must be present in the teleconference when called upon and be recognized. Once called upon, please lower your hand in the Zoom meeting. Board members, if you have comments to make during the meeting, please raise your hand using the raise hand link at the bottom of your screen, and Gail will call you in turn so we can make our decision clear for the record and for the public. So at this point, I'd like to, this is my first time chairing this ERB. I'm assuming the agenda, Gail, do we take roll call?
Yes, but as of right now, we have one member, Clark Stevens.
Okay. Very good. We have one member of the ERB board this morning. All right. Next item on the agenda is item number 1, written oral communication from staff and the board. We have a staff presentation regarding environmental review board role. So Patricia, thanks so much for putting these talking points together. So I just want to go through the presentation real quick based on some of the questions that have been asked at previous ERB meetings. So as an introduction for those watching, the ERB authority is described in the municipal code section and the coastal program. The ERB is an advisory board to the planning director. The board is guided by the ERB guidelines, which were adopted in 1999. These guidelines detail the composition of the board, the type of projects that are reviewed at the board, etc. The ERB has been a very integral part of the review process through the city's history and has functioned well for quite some time now. So the reason for this discussion is to address some questions that arose in previous meetings. One of the first questions is, can projects be scheduled for ERB review earlier in the process? And the answer to that is staff schedules projects before the ERB as soon as practical. We consider 2 factors when scheduling a project before the ERB. 1, the staff's workload, and 2, the project's readiness. So the project is not scheduled for DRB review until all city departments have reviewed the project for planning conformance. But also during the planning conformance review phase, the project undergoes numerous revisions. So presenting the project prior to this would not be very efficient and poses to be ineffective. So there was also some interest that was shown if recommendations made by the ERB were incorporated into the Planning Commission's resolutions and staff reports. And there are 2 ways to track that, team members. First, the ERB member as well as the members of the public may subscribe to the Planning Commission agenda by going to the malibucity.org/news and go on to Planning Commission. You'll receive all Planning Commission agendas there. And second, if an ERB member is interested in following a specific project, then that person may contact planning staff and you'll be added as an interested party to the project. You'll receive notices as well as notification when all items are placed on the Planning Commission agenda. So those were the 2 questions that were brought before the board last hearing. And so if I didn't cover anything, or if you have any questions that were previously asked and not answered, we're here to answer those questions for you. All right. Excellent. So at this point, we're going to go on with the agenda. Old business.
I do
Sorry,
have
go
one
ahead.
thing to add, or a couple things to add for new business.
Okay.
We need to let our board members know that Jennifer Brent has resigned.
That's right.
She is pursuing a career opportunity in another city, and so she won't be able to be on ERB in Malibu anymore. And we also want to let everyone know that we do expect to hear a project at the October ERB meeting on the 23rd. And then also remind everyone that meetings in November and December are on the 3rd Wednesday instead of 4th to accommodate holidays. And that's everything.
Thank you for the update, Gail. All right, so we'll go to, I guess we'll go to old business. There's none on the agenda for today. New business, we have a coastal development permit number 22-059, variance number 24-018, and variance 24-019. This is for an application for the construction of a new one-story single-family home with a basement, water tank, swimming pool, and new on-site water treatment system, including a variance for the required fuel modification to encroach into the 100-foot ESHA buffer, and a variance for construction on slopes steeper than 2.5 to 1. The project owner is MAP Properties LLC. Location of the project is 22281 Carbon Mesa Road. And the case planner is Miss Rainika Brooks, and I will hand it over to Rainika now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sal. Good morning, ERB members. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. Depicted here is the vicinity map showing the project location, which is located in eastern Malibu. The property is approximately 5 acres in size and is surrounded by vacant land, also located within the rural residential zoning designation. Next slide, please. And here is a closer view of the project site, which includes the ESHA layer on this GIS map. The delineated ESHA layer is, for the most part, consistent with the site-specific biological assessment that was done for the property. Next slide, please. Depicted here are some photos of existing site conditions. Again, the property is vacant, and the area is covered in ESHA with the exception of an existing graded pad and an existing graded access road. Next slide, please. Depicted here is the site plan showing the siting of the proposed residence. The residence is sized a little under 7,000 square feet, which includes a basement. The project also includes the installation of a water tank, a swimming pool, patios, landscaping, hardscape, and an on-site wastewater treatment facility. Treatment system. The project is consistent with the ESHA development standards, where the development is under the maximum 10,000 square foot development area. Next slide, please. And this item is being presented to the ERB because the project does anticipate impacts to ESHA. The biological assessment conducted for the project did quantify approximately 3.4 acres of ESHA would be directly impacted by the proposed residence. I will defer to the applicant team to share about how they intend to mitigate the ESHA impacts, but per the LCP, the ESHA impacts must be mitigated in one of 3 ways, including habitat conservation, habitat restoration, or the payment of in lieu fees to the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. Next slide, please. And that does conclude my presentation. I do see members of the applicant team are here. I'm not sure if they're going to be doing a presentation as well, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rainika. All right, do we have any one of the applicants who wish to speak this morning or provide a few words and/or a presentation?
Yes, please. We do have a presentation we'd like to present as well.
Hello, Martin.
Hello.
Right.
First off, thank you so much, Rainika, for the project description. Really appreciate that. We will reiterate that. We'll keep this tight. We wanted to share a little bit of a history of the property itself and why the house was sited where it's sited. Next slide, please. Real quickly, as you know, that's the vicinity map and where the project is located. Next slide. So the property is actually a single lot that goes over the city and county boundaries. It has 2 APNs and is a total of 11.66 acres. Next slide. In 1996, there were 3 lots that were reconfigured from a lot line adjustment to create that 11.66 acre property that is the subject property now. Next slide. So per their findings, they proposed a lot line adjustment that will provided for 3 lots, 2 lots with potential building sites clustered together and accessed from one future access road connected to the driveway on parcel 1 that leads to Carbon Mesa Road. Each of the 3 reconfigured lots will include land located in both the city of Malibu and Los Angeles County. So that is a single lot with 2 APNs. It's kind of a unique situation there. Next slide, please. So this was the original layout of those 3 properties. They were more in a horizontal layout. And due to that, trying to access building sites to each of those lots individually would potentially create more impacts than what they wanted to create with the lot line adjustment. Next slide. And their findings were that the lot line adjustment proposes to reconfigure the applicant's land into 3 lots that individually frame the more logical and relatively flat building sites closest to Carbon Mesa Road. Future development of these potential building sites and grading for a single access road has the potential to result in less impacts to coastal resources compared to developing the lots in the existing configuration. So we saw that existing configuration. Next slide. And they shifted 2 of those lot lines to create what we see today. That center lot, lot 2, is the one we are talking about today, and helped cluster a building site on the city portion of the lot, but closer to Carbon Mesa Road so that you wouldn't have to punch through to those northern lots. Next slide. So this is a zoomed in version, more of the city portion, which we're talking about today. There is an existing access road to the property on the east. And then there is a building pad where we are proposing the house with this application on the subject property in the middle, and another pad relatively close to on the property to the west, creating that clustering effect the Coastal Commission stated in their staff report. Next slide, please. So this is the subject property, the project description. Renika already went through this, so we'll just jump through. Next slide. So that's the single family residence, is 4,700 square feet or a 3,700 square foot basement, a 1,400 square foot subterranean garage with a light well, on-site wastewater treatment, and hammerhead turnaround and fire department access road. Next slide. So this is the property again with that existing access from the east, our proposed access that is on a historically cleared area where you saw with those photos, and the graded building pad that exists there today. Next slide. This is a historical area from 1986. And next slide. We zoom in on that so you can see that historic clearance. It's been there for many years now. Next. Good. Perfect, thank you. Next. So limiting the location are steep slopes throughout the rest of the property. So using this flattest portion of the property for the building site. Next slide. And then also this entire property. So there are 4.38 acres of total fuel modification clearance, which would be on-site and off-site. Next. Zooming in on the property itself, this is the proposed disturbance as well as the site-specific habitat mapping and some existing ornamental landscaping to the south from the neighbor to the south. Next. So a quick breakdown of those habitat categories and impacts. The 4.38 acres is total on-site and off-site, and then subtracting out the neighbors overlapping fuel modification and the neighbor from the south actually, and then 0.66 acres of historical clearance, which is that purple area shown on here. We have a net disturbance of 3.44 acres. Next. As you may have noticed in the staff report, there was a discussion of a coast live oak that was off-site, that was actually studied by our project biologists for impacts to confirm that we wouldn't have impacts. Next slide. And so we took a picture of that, and it's more of a shrub than a tree. And so he studied that to confirm that. Next. And went out and measured the trunks out there and determined there are no two trunks that total more than 8 inches, which is the threshold for it being a native protected tree. So determined that no native protected trees would be impacted by this development. Next. So this is our approved fuel modification plan. There is very little landscaping all to the north end of the property, as well as no irrigation in Zone B was required. And so it will be just modification to existing habitat or native habitat that's there outside of Zone A. Next slide. So in conclusion, the project has been sited and designed in accordance with the Coastal Commission's approval for the future building sites of the property. As designed, the proposed project clusters the proposed development with a potential future development as approved by the CDP by the Coastal Commission. This serves to utilize existing historic clearance previously identified by the Coastal Commission to minimize impacts to ESHA. All development is contained within 9,918 square feet and is sited on that historically graded pad to minimize grading and landform alteration. The residence is designed to be less than 18 feet in height to minimize visual impacts. And with all of those considerations, as proposed, the development is consistent with the Malibu LCP and Coastal Act to minimize impacts to ESHA, landform alteration and grading, and visual impacts. Next. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate the opportunity to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Martin. That was a very comprehensive presentation. Thanks for that, and thank you for the context.
My pleasure.
Okay, I guess at this point, Gail, we ask if there are any questions of the board members.
I believe
Or
we
do
might
we-
have 2 members
oh,
from the public, and they want to raise their hands right now if they want to speak.
Sounds good.
I see no hands raised.
All right, we're moving on. Do any of the board members have any questions or comments?
Yeah, hi. I guess that would be me today.
Hey,
Clark
Mr. Stevens.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Appreciate the background presented there on the project. There are some other notable species that are not trees. I know the tree was covered, but there's some discussion and mitigation recommendations for a couple of different lily species, right? Mariposa lilies. And, but what I'd like to understand better are 2 things. Question related to what historically graded really means in terms of impacts and mitigation assessment. And then the second category of questions has to do with looking more specifically at the fuel modification plans so that we could perhaps understand better the landscape plan proposed for this. Again, on that second issue, because fuel modification is the term of art, but it's really it's not fuel until it's on fire. Up until that time, it's habitat. And one of the things that's, problematic when I look at the total disturbance area is that it suggests, complete and total uniform, right, monoculture of modification. So if we could start with first historic grading. I understand the logic, the positioning on the site that feasible alternatives would create more impacts. But when was the grading done that originally created a pad? The mountain, I'm assuming, didn't have a pad to begin with. And how does that fit? I appreciate the history of the lot subdivision and all that, and the attempt to cluster and provide a single point of access, which is good. But like, at what point in that did the grading happen? Can the applicant respond to that? Civitas.
That pad was graded in the mid 1960s and
Okay.
served as a trailhead for a long time. It had a temporary home on it back in the day. There's an old septic system that has since been removed. But it has been disturbed since well before the Coastal Act.
Right.
And also, this was one of the first homes up there, the house next door, that is at 22271. And that ridge was graded around the time initially that house was built and regraded again in the 1960s.
So historic in this context means pre-coastal.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the impacts are due to the fact that it's been a long time since it was graded, and the habitat's recovering. So that brings me to the second set of questions. I don't know if it's possible for staff or applicant to pull up the detail on the fuel modification plan, the approved fuel mod plan. Would like to understand that and maybe put the environmental comments around that.
Yeah, I
Is it-
believe that was part of the applicant team's PowerPoint. Parker, if you
Yeah.
can pull that up.
Let me go
Which slide
one
were you
more
looking for?
beyond,
Next one.
and the next one. Next one. There's the planting plan specifically.
Okay, so agaves, right? And sorry, I can't read the dimensions of the zones there. The initial zone, right? The radials there. It's hard for me to see that on the screen here. Only minor removal of dead brush, zone C. And thank you for zooming in. Right. So what seems to be disintegrated in the presentation, by the way, I'll just say that, the size, the massing, the positioning, the sinking of the site relative to the ridge line, it's all noted and appreciated as an architect. So I'm not talking about that because that's kind of, that it's competently presented, and it looks like there are attempts made to be sensitive to all the other aspects of the coastal. So I'm really down to, like, what's the landscape going to look like post modification? And that's what I'm having trouble seeing. What my hope would be is that, and there are a couple of things architecturally here that, I hope are being considered. While it's not within the purview of the ERB to talk necessarily about that, for us, the sensitivity to the habitat in a fire-prone area on an upslope, exposed to north exposures. I don't know what the historic fire regime is in this spot and history is, but it starts with the structure, right? Because if the structure is hardened properly, then plus zone 0, the fire risks diminish. And I understand the fire department has reviewed this. What I'm looking for is an understanding of, a couple things. I'm looking at that planting list. That's in zone A, zone B. Okay, I can see it here. And I guess the challenge here in the ERB is that so much of this is in the detail of that zone B plan, right? So I see only minor removal, which is great. And I see the fire department's coming on board with this, that, you know, in that zone. But to zone C is out to, is that the scale, is that out to 200 or 100? What am I looking at there?
It's a 200-foot zone.
It's 200, yeah. And then
So it's
so the
30,
next line
100.
is the 100.
Yeah.
Right, that's the 100. Okay, and so the zone B, that's where we've got foxtail agave.
And that's primarily limited to the flat portions of the pad. The
Yeah.
steeper sections, we're going to leave native and trim, so that the fuel isn't building up in those
Yeah,
zones.
create openings in that. Yeah, well, and again, that would be a recommendation in that zone B to work carefully to create, you know, openings and patches and thin rather than you know, treat it as a removal zone. So I'm happy to hear that. It's just it's hard to know what that looks like without some form of a plan. And this is not a problem. You know, the applicant's doing what is required, and we've got the fuel mod. So I guess there'll be a next step. I just would expect a slightly more specific plan in that zone A, well, certainly in zone A and zone B, and I didn't see a more detailed landscape plan. So I guess you're not at that point, or it doesn't exist.
So the goal here was to keep it as natural as possible. So not planting in those zones to minimize that as much as possible. So this would be really using, since there's so much of it outside of that graded pad that is native vegetation, using that, leaving that as much as possible.
Right, and that's the as much as possible is the design part of this, which is I realize is hard to describe. I guess then maybe one recommendation I would make is a methodology that and I've seen this done in other places, or at least at the planning level, that selects for carefully for the kind of special species within that native mix, right? So if you're going to go in thin, as opposed to just saying, okay, every so many feet, we're going to create an opening, that you might start by going through that zone and carefully identifying all of the, not special status, but unique shrubs within that coastal sage mix. Any grassland meadow, I know the lilies are part of, that's, you know, part of what makes them unique is the context that they're in, and trying to identify in using your bioassessment and then on-site work areas that shouldn't be touched within that zone, and then look at what's left and see if you can create enough defensible space within that zone by removing what you might call the matrix of the thing, you know, the things that are they're more prevalent, and create some horizontal discontinuity with the canopy of the coastal sage that way. So rather than just going out and trying to create patches without reference to the type of plant species that or ecotype that's there. So trying to make that a clear recommendation for the board. I guess the recommendation is to for the owner to engage appropriate horticultural and landscape design team to mark out specifically prior to creating the defensible space, the portions of zone B in particular, because zone Z is clear, it's just dead material, right? For the thinning, but in zone B to identify the most unique conditions of that that existing ESHA and work around protecting those within Zone B to create the openings for defensible space that satisfy the fire department. I know the fire department is open to that real site-specific protection of native species. So I hope you'll cooperate with them and be more specific about the design of that defensible space.
Thank you for your thoughtful comments, Clark. I'm hoping, can you clarify a little bit more about what you were referencing in terms of the unique special status of, so that way there's some type of framework? Yeah.
So within that, the ESHA is a protected type, right, unit, but within that you might have lemonade berry, or you're going to have individual shrubs and species, and then there'll be some kind of matrix of the scrub, of the coastal sage scrub, right? And so the preserving the diversity of plant types that's there would mean that the some of those species, I didn't remember from the bio reports what is out there exactly, but the idea is that you'll have a kind of matrix of vegetation types and plant types, of which one type may be more dominant. I'm not a horticulturist, I'm not a native plant specialist, but the idea is that you could lose more of what you've got most of and maintain the diversity of the plant species within. And that would be a way to start your design of that defensible space, is to preserve as much as possible the unique and diverse plant species that are there.
Perfect,
right?
that helps.
So
Yep.
that if, I don't know what the scrub base is, what that species would be, but if you've got a lot of it, that's what you should remove, subtract from, in order to create your openings and discontinuity for fuel in the case of fire. The other thing I would say, and I think the fire department would be on board with this, is that yes, it's because it's on a ridge, everything's upsloping. So in terms of fuel length, flame length, the whole precinct of 200 feet. At the RCD, we really don't, we recognize that for the most part, not to protect the structure, protect the firefighters that might be protecting the structure. In the case of a fire, that extra 100 feet beyond 100 is that's the logic that the fire department uses to go there. I just continue to quote continuous study that shows that the condition of the landscape beyond 100 feet from the structure has no statistical impact on loss of structure in wildfires for years of studies. That's Keeley, Keeley, and Seifert, Syphard. That's they've got decades of study on that. So anyway, it's definitely be light, in zone 2, and I would look at the windward side, right, at the large fire and ember dynamics there, and tend to be more concerned about the north and northeast slopes. And I noted that there's a single coast live oak. I'm not going to argue about whether or not, because it's beyond the zone of concern, but it's a shrub. Any 2 trunks, that may be the rule, but anyway, that's an established live oak tree, and I'm just wondering if any of, and by the way, if you had an oak woodland on the north or northeast side, that would be, particularly in zone C, that would be a great defensible landscape. I don't know if there's any potential to restore, or any evidence that any kind of oak or scrub oak woodland would have been possible on that north and northeast side, but that tends to be the exposures where they can develop, and also where the wind comes from So disrupting that wind pattern and dissipating embers before you get into the closer zones, B and A, is a good thing. So I would look at that. So my recommendations, I guess, are all about the next steps for the design of the defensible space and that landscape, that it be done sensitively and in a very hands-on, species-specific manner, and think of it as it's a recovering ESHA to begin with, but if it can be helped, a kind of thinking of it as a restoration plan, as opposed to just a fuel mod and vegetation removal project.
Martin or Vitas, could either of you clarify the intention for mitigating the ESHA impacts? I'm not sure if I caught it in the materials on the record. Is the intention to pay in lieu fees? Could you clarify?
Martin will have to address that, but I just wanted to point out that the idea here was this building is going to be landscaped in the natural species that exist there. And those certainly need to be hand selected. We need to work with what is there. We're not intending to plant anything new. And the way this building is being constructed, we're coming off that existing roadway and cutting into the hill from one direction only. So the southern slope is not to be disturbed as we construct this building. Everything is to happen from the roadside. And all of our little planted areas are on that north side of the house, but not on the downhill side of the road. So the context here is we want a lovely house that's fire hardened, but we want to maintain natural habitat on all sides of this building in a way where we can control the fire danger. I'm not sure what the owner has in mind, but I suspect there's going to be an in lieu of fee. But we would gladly hand select and work with someone that's knowledgeable in these areas to preserve those plants that positively should be preserved all around the building. It's part of our development. What is there? We're trying to make advantage of what exists today.
Well, I appreciate the clarification, Vitas. I guess the one place that I'm happy to see 200 feet of max fuel mod, in quote, is in the in lieu fee calculation. So because to restore anywhere in the mountains using those fees is really difficult, and probably unrealistically low. So I'm not going to suggest that I'm opposed to in lieu fee as opposed to some other on-site improvement or modification, but I'd love to see a both and I think it's a value add for, you're right, the house you've created. I'll just throw it out there. There's a lot of large pieces of glass, given the amazing views that you're going to have in all directions from that site. I don't know if you've looked at one of the things with hardening that I was kind of surprised to learn when started looking at this in our work at the RCD is that the speed with which a pane of glass will break under radiant heat is increased by the size of the glass without a break, because it's about the temperature differential between the glass at the frame and the glass at the center. And so breaking things into divided lights, true divided lights, tends to be a big improvement. So I don't know. This is obviously not purview, but I'm just wanted to throw it out there since we're talking, and I'm looking at this really unique design that if there's a way to create a smaller pane size, it increases the defensible qualities of the house. It increases the amount of heat required to break a pane of glass, at which point you got embers inside. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Yeah, so just to close here, because I'm the only, I think, is there anyone else from the board here? If not, I will just close out with reinforcing that what I'm hearing you say is the intent, but not visible in the drawings we have, to be sensitive and species specific in the subtraction of fuel in zone B right? In those natural areas that you want to preserve. And establishing that carefully, because I always think about these things. Sometimes these places get sold and the next owner may not, the next owner may not know that history or understand that maintenance. So getting it established clearly, so that the fire department can be continuity with that, is it's the first and best opportunity to make sure that it doesn't transform into broader and broader clearing of native vegetation over time. So that's all I have.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Do we have anybody else, any other board member that joined us late that might want to make a comment and or other comments or final words from the applicant? Right. Martin, you have your hand up, or is that? from-
Yeah, just real quick, wanted to thank everybody for this opportunity and going through this and the great recommendations and having a discussion around this. Very much appreciated.
Patricia.
I think I'm going to say what Patricia was going to say, which was
Okay.
that the members that aren't present, if they have any recommendations, they can submit them on Friday and they will be included in the record by Friday.
Very good. So the recommended action this morning is to review the proposed project and provide recommendations for the planning director's consideration. I know that Mr. Stevens did provide a detailed recommendation. Did we need to read that recommendation out for the record, or how does that work?
Do you have a clear idea, Renika, of what the recommendation is?
I do. Again, thank you, Clark, for clarifying. I think the only question that I had was what qualifier he was looking for in referencing the unique species within the ESHA. So I got the clarity that that's related to the diversity in that area. And let's see, what else do we have? I have noted there was a recommendation related to the establishment of oak woodland north and northeast of the project site. There was also a recommendation to incorporate restoration/conservation in addition to the payment of in lieu fees. And he also referenced the use of smaller window panes to reduce the potential fire break, I guess, of the glass.
Yeah, if I might, Renika, that the last one I think is informational and consideration as opposed to a recommendation, because this is an ERB, not an ARB. So, but again, what's behind that is the more defensible the structure is, the less need to alter the habitat it's sitting within, right? So it just kind of goes back to those features. I think if Patrick were here today, he would also say, that's a great roof for collecting water. I hope you're using things on site and redistributing. So I guess in an environmental sense, I'd throw in there that local capture with that big roof and reuse in the irrigated zone for soil moisture content close to the house is also a defensible space. Plus, I didn't notice in the plan how that was being handled, but that would be a recommendation to consider, careful capture and on-site reuse of water, because irrigation and native landscaping are not mutually exclusive. And one of the things we've seen in ember in ignition resistance is soil moisture content, distinct from fuel moisture, is a big factor in reducing ignitions. So if you can build soil in that close area. I saw some of the planting had to do with aridity, right? I saw the native cactus and things, and that's good in the zone 0, right? Where you want very little fuel of any kind, right? Any vegetation of any kind. But to the extent that you can capture and reuse that water in like what we're calling zone, we call it 0 and 1, but in the language of the fire department, in your zone A, beyond the 5-foot non-combustible zone, getting fuel moisture in there is a good thing. And obviously it's better if you can capture, store it, and reuse it than it is to take it out of the, the public water system. So I guess that's the last thing I'd throw in there is to reuse the water in the landscape, off the roof, wherever possible.
Just to clarify, with the ERB being a technical advisory committee, the comment related to the smaller window panes, I didn't really take as an architectural design recommendation, but more of, creating a stronger defensible space for the proposed residents.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get a sense of what our purview is here. And
Understood.
there you go. It's a holistic, when you're situating a dwelling in an ESHA, like the nature of the dwelling, not just its footprint, right, is a factor. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Mr. Stevens. Also, Renique, I wanted just to provide a bit more detail on his recommendation about the landscaping plan. So my notes have engage appropriate horticulture and landscape design team to identify the most unique conditions and work with protecting those in Zone B, and opening of defensible space to preserve the diversity of planting types existing, and a methodology that selects special species within the native area and identify the unique shrubs within that coastal sage mix. So I just wanted to add that again.
That's more clear than I was. So thank you.
I know. Thank you, Sal.
You're welcome. All right. Great, terrific. So again, not sure of the process here. Do we go with the formal recommendation? I guess that was already completed by Mr. Stevens, correct? Okay.
Yes.
All right, very good. So do I hear an adjournment?
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
All right, okay, well, it's now 9:51 and we adjourn the September 25th, 2024 meeting of the Environmental Review Board.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.